Hi. I'm working on a new quilt pattern, and I thought I would do this little step and talk to you and let you watch it, kind of vlog style. I got a lot of requests to give these little glimpses into my studio, so I'm trying to fulfill that. I'm working on a new quilt pattern called Honey Pie. This pattern is supposed to release either the end of June or early July. There's two versions of this pattern, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in a minute, but I'm using my Forget-Me-Not fabrics. Here's a little bit of some foreground piecing I've already done. Very excited to use these fabrics and very excited to use blues, and I have a person in mind that I'm going to be giving this quilt to. But what we're going to do today together is to cut the background of this quilt. So normally I cut my foreground and background at the same time, but we had a lot going on in the studio this week, and I wasn't able to do that. So I had cut my foreground and did a little bit of piecing, and I didn't do any of the background. So what I'm going to do is cut the background with you. So let me get started with that. I'm using for my background Bella White Bleached, and I'm just going to starch it just like this. And this pattern is going to be a confident beginner pattern, I think, assuming that everybody agrees that it is. And it is, there's going to be two styles. So one style is fat quarter friendly, and it has multiple stars all over it. And the other star is not fat quarter friendly. It requires yardage, and it is one giant star on the whole quilt. So I'm into this whole look, but I thought I'd start with the fat quarter friendly version since I wanted to try out my new Forget-Me-Not fabric collection. I thought I'd try that out and then move on to the bigger version. I don't know what fabrics I'm going to use for that version yet. This side is starched and pressed. So let me just flip this over and do this other side because I've got like 2 yards of background here, and I folded it together so that I could cut 4 layers, at a time. So getting this prepped so we can start cutting it. My normal way of working through a pattern is I write the pattern, and I wrote this pattern where I designed this pattern back in fall 2023, and I'm only now spring 24 have written it. So I designed it a long time before I actually wrote it, and that just kind of gives it a little time to sit and stew and make sure that every time I come back to the pattern, when I come back to it, on my computer, I still think it looks great. So a lot of times I'll sit there and I'll tweak them for months and months and months and months before I ever actually think it's time to write it. Okay. And then once I get at least one version tested, I usually send it to my tech editor. She will, edit it. And usually she focuses on math and grammar. And after I get that back from her, I'll make the changes she suggests most of the time. And then I'll send it to about 10 different quilt testers. So they'll have the pattern for about a month, and they will actually make quilt tops from it. And after about 3 weeks to 4 weeks, they'll send me back notes. And their notes can sometimes be grammar and math, but most of the time they're more like the flow. Like this diagram is off from this, instructions, things like that. Or they'll tell me that I need to change the flow, things, just different small things like working through it, where what parts do you like, what parts do you not like, what parts gave you trouble, kind of things like that. So, but before all that begins, I have to make the pattern myself. So, and that's what I'm doing. All right. I'm going to flip this camera over there. All right. When I'm cutting fabric, I like to work this way to this way. And the reason I do that is because the ruler, if I start the ruler right here, I can't use my whole look 1 inch away trick that I always use. If you've seen any of my cutting demos, you know what I'm referring to when I say my 1 inch away demo. But if I start here and move this way, I can always use that trick. And that trick has changed my whole cutting experience. I no longer make cutting errors. When I first started quilting, I would say the first 5-6 years of quilting, my cutting errors were next level. Like they were just constant. All right, let me pull this pattern up real quick. And this pattern is coming in 2 different sizes. So you've got 2 sizes for the giant star and 2 sizes for the multi-stars. That's what I'm calling it. 1 single star, multi-star. I'm just going to kind of work through these on my own. Actually quite a bit. And I'm working this way because most of the time I'll cut my background this way across the mat. I know on a lot of my cutting demos you see me cut my fat quarters standing here going this way, but with this giant piece of fabric it just works out better for me to do it this way. All right, so right now I'm going to be cutting a whole bunch of strips. And I actually need 13, so I'm going to fold back one of these layers like that, and then cut my 13th strip. All right, now that I'm going to stack all these similar strips. Okay. All right, next step. Oh, that's another thing I like to do. You know how in patterns it'll tell you to cut 6 6-inch strips, and then it'll tell you how to subcut it, and then it'll tell you cut 4 3.5-inch strips. I like to cut all my strips, put them over here, and then go back and subcut them. I feel like it just keeps me from having to maneuver the fabric too much. So that's the way I usually work through it if you're wondering what's going on. All right, I'm going to have to get my layers folded back together. All right. Here's another odd number. 3 6.5-inch. All right. All right, that's 2, and then 1 more. 1 2 3 4 5 6. 1 2 3 4 5 6.5. All right, that's those strips done. Two more sets. I have made quilt patterns where my background would be wrong and things like that. So this is a very important for me to work through the pattern myself and make sure that everything is coming out right. Because even sending it to a tester, you know, they don't buy the pattern, but even sending it to get tested, you don't want to cause anybody cutting errors because it just makes quilting so much more frustrating and not as much fun. So I really, really like to have an accurate pattern before I send it to them. And I mean, mistakes still happen sometimes, but I do the best I can. Or try to work them out as much as I can. All right, we're cutting 6 5-inch strips. And I'm getting worried about this one because it doesn't look like I've got enough background on it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I've either miscut my background or I didn't have enough. All right, I got the 6 strips here, so that was fine. Let me just put these over here. What I don't have is my 3 1/2-inch strips. I need to make a note. So hang on. After some calculating, I am off a 1/2 yard. So that's exactly the kind of thing that happens during these little testing periods, and that is why it's so important for me to test this pattern myself before sending it out to anyone. So let me cut me another 1/2 yard of fabric. That's what I was short, a 1/2 yard. And 2018. All right, and I need to press this, so now I've got everything in my way. Let me just kind of move things like this. I feel like I spend a lot of time doing the math on these patterns, and then when it comes out that I haven't done it accurate, it is extremely aggravating, and I get so put out with myself. I'm trying not to work on that, but it's like you spend hours at something and then it's still something wrong with it. So I guess that's just part of being human. All right, back to it. I need a couple more. I need a couple of 3 1/2-inch strips here. I'm just gonna put this one in my scraps, so because I'll have more than enough now. 3 1/2-inch. I was a 1/2 yard short from accuracy. This is extra. Throw that there for now. All right. Then I'm going to put these all together, and then I'm going to do my subcutting. So I'm going to go back and pick up all those strips that I just cut. So let's start with the smallest ones. And I always write my patterns where if you need a whole bunch of 6-inch strips, you cut them all at once. And if you have to subcut them differently, I'll put that in there. But a lot of times patterns will have cut 2, 2 1/2, then subcut those into 2 1/2-inch squares, or then cut another 2 1/2. I like to do it where you cut all your 2-inch strips at the same time. And if you have to subcut them differently, I note that. I think I find it easier to work through myself. I don't know if it's easier for every quilter, but that's just the way I like to do it. All right, I need 5 of these. So I'm going to get these stacked up. So just like this. I'm going to get that other rotary cutter out because I'm going to use my stripology ruler. I like to use it whenever I can because it really speeds up your cutting. So if this is the first time you've seen a stripology ruler, I have a whole demo just for it. So definitely check that out. It's an expensive ruler, but if you're quilting every day like I am, it's worth it. At least I think so. All right. And then I was supposed to cut 16. Let's see if I was able to do that. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. All right. So we have all these tiny squares cut. All right. One part done. All right, and then I'm cutting 6.5-inch squares. Wait, no, I'm still cutting 2-inch strips. I'm cutting 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. I talked to somebody recently who had ADHD, and she was talking about how cutting up at the very beginning of the quilt, cutting everything for the quilt was just outside of her, like it was not going to happen. So if that's you too, I mean, I know most quilters will cut all their fabrics up at the beginning of the quilt, but you definitely don't have to do it that way. You could, break it up. I broke this one up. I did my foreground and then I did my background. So you could do something like that. All right, 4.5 inches. All right, let's try this out. Two, 6, 8. Let me just double check that I cut that right. I think I forgot to cut my selvage off. Let me do that. All right, 2, 4, 6, 8. All right, this is go in my scrap bin, and then that's another part done. All right, I should have 4 more of these strips. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. So far, so good. Okay, and now I'm cutting these into rectangles. All right. Try not to forget to cut the selvage off this time. So back to this ruler, what it does is it means I don't have to pick up my ruler and adjust every single time. So that's really, really handy. All right, this one got to cut it in a funny way. All right, so that should do it. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. So there's these long rectangles. All right, now we're starting on the next set, 6.5 inch. And these are the ones that had some extra. All right, so I'm going to cut squares. Here we go. That should be right. All right, scraps, garbage, and then my 6-inch squares are done. Oh, this one didn't cut quite all the way. All right, here we go. Done. Moving on to 3.5 inches. Oh, you know what? I take that back. I had two extra, so I want to get them out of the mix now, because if I leave those extra in, when I start making this pattern, I'll think I have done something wrong if I have two extra squares. So let me go ahead and pull those. All right, 3.5. I'm setting all of these aside. All right. So I don't actually have to do anything to those, so I won't. And then the 5-inch, same thing, setting all of these aside. So that was not terrible. Found one mistake. Let me get my project box. I'm going to be working on this quilt pattern when I can, so it's not going to be like just a steady flow of work through it. I may pull it out every other day and get a little here, a little there done. Okay. And I'll go ahead and put all these in there. I think these are extra. All right. There we go. All right. So this will keep them all together for me, and I won't have to, get anything lost. And then when I want to work on it, I can pull it out of the closet. And when I don't think I'll work on it for a couple days, I'll put it back in the closet. All right. So that is all for my cutting background. I'm done. Yay. And I can start piecing this quilt, which I'm excited to do. So I'm going to work through the pattern on my own, and I'll start as soon as I get it done. I'll pop on here and I'll show it to you. Thanks for cutting background fabric with me. I will see you next time.